You're not going to believe what just happened. Brad Garlinghouse was on stage at DC FinTech Week, and what he said might be one of the clearest signs yet that Ripple is gearing up for a massive expansion phase, unlike anything we've seen before. We're talking global custody partnerships, billion-dollar acquisitions, and real-world integrations stretching from Asia to Africa, all centered around the XRP ledger. What's happening right now behind the scenes is setting up the kind of foundational shift that institutions have been waiting for. This isn't financial advice. Brad just confirmed on stage that Ripple is now operating across 4 major verticals: payments, custody, stablecoins, and M&A. Let that sink in. Ripple isn't just building for the future anymore, they're scaling in real time. He mentioned the $125 billion acquisition of Hidden Road, one of the largest non-bank prime brokers on the planet, and their purchase of Rail, a leading enterprise-grade stablecoin company for corporate treasury operations. That means major global firms are now able to use Ripple's infrastructure to move money instantly using stablecoins and tokenized assets, all powered by the XRP ledger. This is how global liquidity systems evolve quietly but decisively. When a company like Ripple spends over $1 billion expanding its ecosystem during a time when most firms are tightening up, it tells you exactly where they believe the world is heading. And that's why every serious investor watching XRP right now understands this isn't about speculation anymore. It's about infrastructure. Now, if you want to really understand how top investors are positioning themselves for this next wave of crypto wealth, especially around XRP, check out the XRP Millionaire Blueprint. It's a complete guide that includes a powerful document, a detailed infographic, and an in-depth video that walks you through how to navigate this coming era of digital asset growth. It's designed to give you clarity, confidence, and a real framework to move smarter while others are still guessing. You'll find the XRP Millionaire Blueprint linked in the pinned comment below this video. Now back to the interview. What really stood out was how Brad differentiated Ripple and XRP. He said something most people still don't understand. Ripple, the company, is a private firm that raised venture capital and issued shares. Those are securities. XRP, on the other hand, is open source technology. It's decentralized. It doesn't have a CEO. Ripple simply uses XRP within its products. But there are dozens, if not hundreds, other companies building on the same ecosystem. That's the part so many critics miss. XRP isn't controlled by Ripple. Brad literally pointed out that amendments to the XRP ledger have been passed by the community even when Ripple opposed them. That's how decentralized governance works. You can't fake that level of transparency. The network operates on majority consensus. Ripple can advocate, but they don't command. And this is exactly the kind of clarity regulators have been avoiding. The lawsuit was never just about XRP. It was about defining how open source technology fits into modern financial infrastructure. Brad emphasized that countries outside the US are already moving forward. Asia, Europe, and now Africa are racing ahead with clear digital asset frameworks, while the US is still debating what counts as a security. And that's where things get even more interesting because Ripple isn't waiting for permission anymore. They're executing globally. Just days after DC FinTech Week, Ripple announced a strategic partnership with Absa Bank, one of Africa's largest and most respected financial institutions, managing over $119 billion USD in assets. Through this collaboration, Absa will leverage Ripple's institutional-grade custody technology to store and manage tokenized assets, including cryptocurrencies and other digital instruments. Let that sink in. This isn't just a fintech startup trying to experiment with blockchain. This is one of Africa's major banks integrating Ripple's custody infrastructure directly into their operations. That means customers will have access to secure, compliant, tokenized asset custody under the Ripple umbrella, and that's a first for Africa. The expansion pattern is crystal clear. Ripple is covering the map. They now have custody and payment infrastructure live or in development across Europe, the Middle East, Asia Pacific, Latin America, and now Africa. Every single major region is being connected under the same network of compliant enterprise-grade digital liquidity. The managing director for Ripple's Middle East and Africa division, Merrick, said it best. Africa is experiencing a massive shift in how value is stored and exchanged. This partnership underscores Ripple's commitment to unlocking that potential, helping banks and corporations embrace digital assets with confidence. And when you step back and look at the macro picture, the strategy becomes obvious. Ripple's acquisitions, like Hidden Road and Rail, position them to control key pillars of digital finance, custody, stablecoins, and prime brokerage. Combine that with the XRP ledger's ability to move liquidity across borders instantly, and you've got a complete financial stack that traditional institutions simply can't replicate yet. What's happening in Africa is just one piece of the larger playbook. Emerging markets are where financial transformation happens fastest. These regions don't have the same legacy systems holding them back. They can leapfrog directly into blockchain-powered finance. That's exactly what's happening with Ripple's partnership with ABSA, and according to analysis from respected researchers in the XRP community, this deal could go even deeper than just custody. It signals the start of client-facing digital asset solutions, not just back-end infrastructure. In other words, customers of major banks could soon have direct access to Ripple-powered custody and tokenization through their existing financial accounts. That's massive. Now think about how this ties to Ripple's stablecoin and liquidity roadmap. Brad Garlinghouse made it clear. Ripple is now fully active in the stablecoin business. Combine that with XRP's native role in liquidity bridging, and you have a multi-layered system where fiat, stablecoins, and crypto coexist seamlessly. Ripple's institutional clients will be able to move across all three without friction, without SWIFT, and without legacy intermediaries slowing it down. This is where the conversation shifts from just XRP price talk to understanding XRP's position in the future of finance. Ripple is architecting the rails for tokenized money. That includes central bank digital currencies, stablecoins, and other real-world assets being moved and settled instantly. And it's not just theory. Ripple's network now spans governments, central banks, payment corridors, and enterprise treasuries. Every new partnership builds liquidity depth for XRP, because at the end of the day, that's the native asset powering settlement across the ledger. If you're paying attention, you can see the strategy play out. First, establish trust and compliance through custody, then expand payment corridors, and finally connect it all through tokenization. Ripple is literally building the digital plumbing for a new financial system. And as that system matures, the need for instant settlement and interoperability skyrockets. Exactly what XRP was built for. But it doesn't stop with Africa. Ripple's presence across Asia is accelerating too. Partnerships are expanding across Singapore, Japan, and the Philippines, regions that already have favorable crypto regulations. Add to that the global rollout of Ripple's institutional custody service and its acquisition of leading infrastructure companies, and you start to see why many insiders believe Ripple's long-term positioning is almost unbeatable. When Brad said on stage, "We're going to continue to play offense," he meant it. Ripple is buying, building, and expanding aggressively while most companies are scaling back. That's the mark of confidence, not desperation. It's the behavior of a firm that knows where the future is going and is already building the highways for it. And when you look at what's coming next, the integration of stablecoins, tokenized assets, and global custody all under one interoperable network, you realize Ripple isn't trying to fit into the current financial system. They're redefining it. Asia is where Ripple's real test begins, and so far, it's passing with flying colors. You can feel the acceleration. The infrastructure that started as isolated corridors between banks has turned into full-scale regional integrations. Ripple isn't just providing the software anymore, they're supplying the backbone that connects multiple banking ecosystems under one interoperable network. And when you start connecting those dots, you see that Asia isn't just a growth market. It's becoming the foundation for the global liquidity engine that Ripple's building. The payment corridors between Japan and the Philippines, Singapore and India, and now into parts of Southeast Asia, all powered by the XRP ledger, are forming what looks like a blueprint for how Ripple will scale the rest of the world. Brad said something subtle during his interview that reveals exactly why this is so important. He said Ripple is in the payments business, leveraging core technologies around blockchain and the XRP ledger. That's the key phrase. Leveraging core technologies. Because once you've built payments, you've built the rails. From there, custody, stablecoins, and tokenized assets can all ride on top of the same infrastructure. That's what's happening in Asia right now. Tokenization at the institutional level. Corporates are starting to move beyond speculative interest and into actual deployment. Ripple's partners in the region are testing real-world settlement between banks using stablecoins pegged to regional currencies. And all of it ties back to the XRP ledger's ability to handle on-chain liquidity. This is the stage where early adoption turns into full integration. And while much of the market still focuses on ETFs or short-term price movements, Ripple's strategy is crystal clear: dominate the infrastructure layer before the rest of the world even realizes it's being built. Now, let's talk about Weebies, because this is one of those projects that sounds small at first, but is actually enormous when you think about the implications. They recently filed a press release with the SEC announcing their plan to create a tokenized travel reward exchange platform that integrates XRP-based stablecoin settlement. This may sound niche, but it's brilliant. Think about all the airline miles, hotel points, and credit card rewards floating around. Billions of dollars worth of value locked inside fragmented ecosystems that don't talk to each other. Ripple's infrastructure allows that value to move freely, instantly, and transparently. It brings liquidity to an industry that has always been isolated. If we succeed and early signs point to major partners in North America and Asia, it could completely redefine loyalty programs as we know them. You'll be able to exchange travel points for other rewards, settle instantly across borders, and have the transactions verified on-chain. The XRP ledger becomes the neutral layer that makes it all interoperable. That's not just convenience, that's real-world tokenization in action, and this is what the XRP ecosystem has been quietly building toward for years: practical institutional-grade use cases that solve actual financial inefficiencies. What's fascinating here is how all these seemingly separate developments, custody, payments, tokenization, stablecoins, and even loyalty points are converging. Ripple's ecosystem is expanding in multiple directions, but they're all connected through the same mission: eliminate friction from the movement of value. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, the financial conversation just took a bizarre turn. Paxos, the issuer behind PayPal USD, accidentally minted 300 trillion stablecoins. Yes, trillion with a T. It was an internal minting error, but the number itself sent shockwaves through the market. The tokens were burned quickly, but for a few moments, that mistake revealed just how fragile some of these systems still are. If an issuer can accidentally create hundreds of trillions in digital assets out of thin air, even temporarily, it raises serious questions about oversight, auditability, and systemic risk. Now, compare that to Ripple's approach. Ripple's entire model is built on compliance and transparency. Their institutional partners require enterprise-grade custody, regulated stablecoin frameworks, and auditable liquidity trails. That's the difference between a financial network that's designed to scale and one that's improvising its way through the next market cycle. This is why institutions trust Ripple. They're not just selling blockchain. They're providing the kind of infrastructure that traditional banks, hedge funds, and payment providers can actually use without breaking regulatory frameworks. It's compliant by design. And that's exactly what regulators in regions like Singapore, Dubai, and London have been encouraging: responsible innovation with clarity. With Ripple's partnerships in those regions are flourishing precisely because they align with that vision. It's no coincidence that we're seeing Ripple's custody network expand across these same jurisdictions. Each region adds a new link in the chain of digital liquidity. And with every partnership, XRP gains more utility behind the scenes. The thing most people overlook is that Ripple doesn't need to mention XRP in every announcement for XRP to benefit. The network effect grows naturally as more institutions integrate Ripple's infrastructure. Once those systems need on-chain liquidity, the most efficient bridge asset is XRP, and that's what's quietly happening right now. Ripple's institutional grade custody, its stablecoin operations, and its payment corridors are all feeding into an environment where XRP becomes the neutral settlement layer, the bridge that unites all of it. This is why analysts have started calling XRP the invisible infrastructure play. It's not the flashy meme coin that spikes on hype. It's the quiet backbone being built under the global financial system. Every time Ripple expands into a new region, it's not just about branding, it's about positioning XRP where the next $1 trillion in tokenized value will flow. Now, let's circle back to Africa for a second because that region's role in this strategy is bigger than people realize. Africa has some of the fastest growing economies in the world, and its banking infrastructure is ripe for modernization. By bringing Ripple's custody and tokenization technology to major institutions like Abiesa, they're effectively creating a launchpad for regional stablecoins, payment corridors, and on-chain financial products. And it's not just about Africa. It's about what that footprint represents. Ripple is proving that its infrastructure works across continents, regulatory environments, and banking systems. That's scalability at the highest level, not just technically, but institutionally. This is why people inside the space are starting to say, we're entering the utility era of crypto. The hype cycles are fading. What's replacing them are real use cases with measurable value, built on networks that can actually handle institutional volume. Ripple is leading that transition. They've evolved from a single payments company into a full-scale digital asset infrastructure provider with operations spanning from the Americas to Africa, Europe to Asia Pacific. And every single one of those moves strengthens XRP's long-term position. The next frontier, and you can see the signs already, will be the tokenization of real-world assets at scale. Ripple's technology is already capable of handling that. We're seeing early implementations with securitized real estate, carbon credits, and institutional assets like bonds. That's just the beginning. The total addressable market for tokenized real-world assets could exceed tens of trillions of dollars in the coming decade. And Ripple's custody and liquidity solutions put them at the front of that wave. Every asset that gets tokenized needs to be stored, moved, and settled, exactly what Ripple specializes in. And when you pair that with the growing demand for instant cross-border payments, it's not hard to see where all this is going. The infrastructure Ripple's building today could very well become the standard for tomorrow's financial system. Now, what makes this moment unique is that we're seeing the lines blur between traditional finance and blockchain-based finance. Custody solutions once reserved for crypto exchanges are now being used by global banks. Stable coins that were once niche are now part of major payment systems. And through it all, Ripple has positioned itself as the company bridging both worlds. Literally. That's the real story here. Ripple isn't chasing trends. It's designing systems that last decades. And while most people are still arguing about short-term regulation, Brad Garlinghouse and his team are quietly onboarding some of the largest financial institutions in the world. If you zoom out, it's clear the groundwork being laid right now will define how money moves in the next generation. Ripple's building the rails, XRP provides the liquidity, and the rest of the industry is starting to follow their lead. And as all of this unfolds, from Africa's custody expansion to Asia's tokenized payment systems, there's another layer that's about to explode in relevance: enterprise-grade integration. Because once those systems start connecting directly to corporate treasuries and global liquidity pools, the ripple effect becomes unstoppable. What's happening now is the kind of shift that most investors only recognize after it's already played out. Ripple has spent years positioning itself for this exact moment, where global finance is finally ready for tokenized liquidity and blockchain-powered settlement. The quiet groundwork is turning into real deployment. We're watching financial giants, not just fintech startups, adopt Ripple's infrastructure because they see where the future is heading. Tokenized assets, digital currencies, and seamless cross-border liquidity. Ripple isn't trying to replace banks. They're making banks more powerful, faster, and interconnected than they've ever been. And that's where the true brilliance of Ripple's model shows itself. Instead of fighting the system, they're upgrading it. Governments, central banks, and corporate treasuries are now realizing that this technology doesn't compete with regulation. It complements it. It makes compliance auditable, transactions transparent, and settlements instant. That's exactly why Ripple's momentum hasn't slowed. It's accelerating. Every acquisition, every regional partnership, every new regulatory milestone adds another piece to the global puzzle they've been building since day one. Take the United States. While regulation there has lagged behind, Ripple is strategically positioned to benefit the moment clarity arrives. Brad Garlinghouse has said repeatedly that the US can't afford to fall behind. And now, with growing bipartisan support for clearer digital asset legislation, the tide might finally be turning. Once that clarity hits, Ripple's US operations will expand as aggressively as they already have overseas. But here's the key: even without that, Ripple is already global. Their network spans across continents from London to Dubai, Singapore to Sao Paulo. Each new jurisdiction Ripple enters multiplies the reach of the XRP ledger, expanding the liquidity web that connects everything together. And it's not just custody or payments anymore. We're now entering the integration phase where Ripple's infrastructure connects directly into enterprise-grade systems and treasury management platforms. That's when real-scale adoption happens. When Fortune 500 companies can settle multi-currency transactions, tokenize assets, or move cross-border capital instantly, that's when the world realizes this isn't the future anymore. It's the present. The integration of Ripple's stablecoin business is also crucial. It bridges fiat with digital liquidity in a way that keeps institutions comfortable while still unlocking blockchain efficiency. Corporates don't want to jump straight into volatile assets. They want the benefits of speed, transparency, and efficiency without taking speculative risk. Ripple's stablecoin platform provides exactly that. And once they're in the ecosystem, XRP naturally becomes part of the liquidity solution. Now think about the scale. Ripple's payment corridors handle settlements that once took 2 to 3 days and compress them into seconds. Liquidity that was once trapped across borders is now freed up, available instantly, and moving through tokenized channels. This is the liquidity layer of the new global economy: fast, compliant, and interoperable. What's most impressive is that Ripple has built this network without relying on hype. They've done it through partnerships, licensing, and infrastructure that regulators actually support. That's why you're seeing established institutions adopting Ripple's technology, not because it's trendy, but because it's necessary. And the more global institutions rely on Ripple's ecosystem, the more the demand for liquidity scales, which is exactly where XRP's utility shines. It's the bridge that connects fragmented systems into one global pool of value. It's also worth noting how all of this plays into the next liquidity cycle. Historically, every crypto bull cycle has followed a period of infrastructure expansion. What Ripple is doing right now is setting the stage for that next cycle. The corridors are being built, the custody solutions are in place, and the tokenized assets are about to flow through them. When that happens, the institutions already in the Ripple network will have a massive first-mover advantage. Now, imagine this on a global scale: stablecoins for corporate treasuries, tokenized bonds for institutional investors, instant settlement for banks, cross-border liquidity for central banks, all of it powered by infrastructure that's live, compliant, and scalable. Ripple is building the rails for the world's digital liquidity layer, and the XRP ledger sits at the center of it all. It's a complete transformation, one that most people won't fully recognize until it's too late. But make no mistake, it's already happening. The next financial system is forming right now in real time under the surface, and Ripple's ecosystem is the framework that's making it all possible. Look around. From Absa Bank in Africa to Weebis in North America to payment corridors across Asia, it's all pointing in the same direction: a borderless, frictionless, tokenized world of finance. Every piece of news we're seeing, from Ripple's acquisitions to its expanding custody network, confirms that they're not waiting for the future to arrive. They're engineering it. And the smartest investors, they're not just watching price action. They're studying infrastructure, positioning themselves where the next $1 trillion shift will happen. Because once the liquidity fully activates, when global banks, stablecoins, and tokenized assets all flow through the same ecosystem, the value creation will be historic. So when people say XRP is quiet right now, that's exactly the point. The infrastructure phase always feels quiet before the momentum explodes. That's how real revolutions begin. Silently, then suddenly. And as we stand on the edge of this new financial era, it's becoming clear that Ripple's strategy has been deliberate from the start. Build first, dominate later. We are now entering the dominate stage. If you understand what's unfolding, if you can see beyond the headlines and into the architecture of this new system, you realize how massive this opportunity truly is. And if you want to go even deeper to understand exactly how top investors are positioning for this next crypto wealth wave, especially around XRP, that's what the XRP Millionaire Blueprint is built for. It's a complete guide that includes a document, infographic, video, and more, showing how to navigate what's coming in this new digital asset era with clarity and confidence. You'll find the XRP Millionaire Blueprint linked in the pinned comment below this.